by creating certainty for job creators as well as strengthening public safety. As we move towards a more normal rhythm in the legislature, will we also be looking to fulfill more of the promises we made to Albertans when they gave us a mandate to govern, including affirming parental rights to make important choices about their children's education. Tomorrow, when MLAs return to the chamber, though, we will be starting with a COVID-19 debate between the legislature, or between all parties in the legislature, starting with the Premier sometime tomorrow morning, addressing the House and updating both the House and through the House, the province, on where we are at on COVID-19, as well as a few of the primary ministers who are responsible for the management of the virus and of the COVID-19 pandemic inside our province. At the same time, there'll be an opportunity for all members of the House, including government members and opposition members, to ask the Premier and those ministers questions. I anticipate that process will take the majority of the day tomorrow and into the evening possibly. After that, though, on Thursday, we will be starting to move on with regular legislation inside the chamber. We will be tabling 3 bills this week, the first being Bill 7, the Responsible Energy Development Amendment Act. We had a review of the regulator, as many people know, and during that process the government heard that the approval for applications was unnecessary, long, and was discouraging investment in this province. This legislation that we will be bringing forward will enable the government to set maximum timelines for the Alberta Energy Regulator to review applications and make decisions in an efficient and timely manner while ensuring environmental protections and public safety. We will also be tabling Bill 15, the Choice in Education Act. This act will honour our platform commitment to affirm parents have the primary responsibility for education of their children. And Bill 16 will also go into the House this week, which is the Victims of Crime Amendment Act, which is we are proposing to expand the scope of the Victims of Crime Fund and the transitioning the Victim Financial Benefit Program into a service-based program. In addition to that, I will briefly talk about the fact that we will continue practicing social distancing inside the chamber. While we work to return to normal here in the precinct and in the Alberta legislature, we will also have to be putting in processes, and we already have in the days or the weeks past when we sat, but social distancing processes to help keep MLAs safe in the chamber. And I'm happy to answer any questions specifically about those steps that we'll be taking in the coming weeks. I can speak on behalf of the Government Caucus. I know that they are excited to be back in Edmonton and to get back to work on behalf of the people of Alberta. I can say as Government House Leader, I'm happiest when the legislature is sitting, and I'm looking forward to the chamber opening tomorrow and us returning to some semblance of normal inside the legislature and moving forward on behalf of the people of Alberta. And with that, I'm happy to take some questions.
Okay, go to the phones.
Our first question comes from Graham Thompson of iPolitics. Your line is open.
Minister, just wondering about the Bill 15 choice in education. Could you delve a bit deeper into that in terms of, this sort of brings up echoes of Bill 24 and teachers outing students and things like that. So can you explain a bit more about Bill 15, please?
Well, Bill 15 was an important part of our platform and something that Albertans voted for in overwhelming numbers in the last election. And I can tell you something that many Albertans, particularly constituents that I represent, that I talk to, are excited to see come to the chamber and a promise being fulfilled from our mandate. It will focus on recognition of Section 26.3 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which states, Graham, simply that parents have a prior right to choose the kind of education that shall be given to their children. This bill will demonstrate our government support for all educational programming, including public, separate, francophone, charter, and independent schools, as well as alternative programs and homeschooling. So again, it's quite detailed within our platform. The legislation itself you'll see tomorrow, I believe, when we table it for first reading, if not Thursday. And the Education Minister will be doing a detailed briefing as well as an announcement around that bill, but it is the fulfillment of our campaign promise when it comes to school choice.
We have a number of folks on the line, so we're just going to limit it to one question. Can we go to the next caller? Thanks.
Our next question comes from James Keller of the Globe and Mail. Your line is open.
This is more about this Bill 15. How much would this give, charter schools, independent schools, latitude to deviate from the provincial curriculum, particularly when it comes to, contentious topics, sex ed, Sochi, that sort of thing?
Well, I'm not going to get in House Leader brief to start a session in great technical detail about the Minister of Education's legislation. She'll have an announcement on that bill as she brings it into the House. But again, the intention of that bill is to fulfill the campaign promise. And our party and the United Conservative Party and Alberta's government believe strongly in Alberta parents having the choice to be able to provide education for their children through the mechanisms that I just outlined in the answer to Mr. Thompson's question. And we campaigned hard on that, and we will be fulfilling that promise for Albertans this week when we table that legislation.
Okay, super. Next question, please.
Our next question comes from Rafi Buchanan of CBC. Your line is open.
Hi, Minister Nixon. I'm wondering if you can tell me where the Protecting Critical Infrastructure bill is at, and also what you make of Greta Thunberg criticizing your colleague and her remarks about being a great time to build pipelines because of protests being limited due to COVID-19. She said, at least we're seeing some honesty for once. Unfortunately, this is how large parts of the world are run.
Well, first off, Bill 1 is currently in the chamber, already started the process. It went in prior to COVID-19, as you would know, and has kind of sat in the chamber as a result of the work that's been taking place in regards to the pandemic. It is my intention to move forward with Bill 1 in the coming weeks. I haven't slated it for debate yet. I will be looking at that shortly, but the intention will be to make sure that Bill 1 is passed prior to the spring, which will now be a summer sitting as well. Concluding. We still see it as an important piece of legislation. It obviously got put to the side when we were dealing with the pandemic when it broke out. In regards to my colleagues' comments, I can only say this. Albertans want pipelines built. We are focused as a province on jobs, the economy, and pipelines. Pipelines remain a priority of the people of Alberta and necessary for our prosperity and our future. And we will continue as a government to do everything possible to get our product to market and to stand up for our largest industry and the people that work within that largest industry. And I think Minister Savage is rightly pointing out that there are people, unfortunately, both within this province and across the country and the world, who have dedicated themselves to stopping Alberta's clean natural resources from being able to enter the market. And I think she was, quite frankly, just pointing out the obvious, that at this moment, because of COVID, there is probably less people taking the opportunity to go out and protest pipelines. Minister Savage was not saying that the Alberta government in any way would prevent somebody from legally protesting. We believe that people have a democratic right to be able to express their views inside democracy, but at the same time, we also will continue to dedicate ourselves to being able to get our product to market.
Super. Next question, please.
Tom Vernon of Global News. Your line is open.
Hi, Minister. Thanks for taking my question. It's about the coal policy shift that takes effect on June 1st. There are a lot of concerns being raised about what this will mean for sensitive environmental areas on the eastern slopes and in the foothills there. Can you just talk about the thinking behind this policy? Why make this shift when there was already development through different processes through there?
Well, the coal policy was created in 1970-something. At a point where we didn't have the same level of environmental protection and the same environmental and regulatory processes inside our province. And so the Minister of Energy and the Department of Energy are removing what is really an outdated policy. And instead, the government will continue to focus on our strict regulatory processes, particularly when it comes to the eastern slopes. Many of the areas that I've seen both the opposition and others refer to as possible places where this would all of a sudden cause coal mines to be built are not accurate. There already remains large portions of that area along the eastern slopes underneath Division 1 land protection, which don't only prevent coal mine development, but prevent all development. There may be some stuff that's been grandfathered that was in those areas, but nothing new. The regulatory process will remain in place. You would have to go through to create a mine, a significant regulatory process with both the Alberta government and the AER in different capacities. And all environmental rules to protect these environmental sensitive areas remain in place. And if a mine was not within that process or those rules, it certainly would not be approved. So again, you're talking about a policy from the 1970s, and our province deals with environmental protection of these areas in very different ways now.
Okay, we'll go to the next question, please.
Our next question comes from Lisa Johnson of Post Media. Your line is open.
Good morning, Minister. Thanks for taking my question. I'm wondering what the status is of Bill 10 and what the government plans to do to address it. I know that the Premier had mentioned that at one point the government lawyers would be looking at some amendments, and then more recently he spoke about it on social media and seemed to suggest that there wasn't much to worry about with that bill. So I'm wondering what kind of committee might be struck, what's going to happen going forward with that bill?
Well, the Premier did not say there wasn't much to worry about when it comes to the Public Health Act. This creates some confusion for those of us who don't spend our days reading bills. But Bill 10 itself makes barely any changes to anything. But what it does do is it changes a portion of the Public Health Act. And so when people go look at Bill 10 to understand what it's doing, they then see that it's associated with the Public Health Act, and they start to read the Public Health Act, which has been in place since like 1915 inside our province. And obviously it's evolved over the decades, but it is a very old act inside the province of Alberta. And then they start to read things in the act, and they assume that that was part of Bill 10, when the reality is it's stuff that's been within legislation long before anybody that's elected in any party has been sent to Edmonton to do the work. So the Premier has indicated that he wants to have a conversation about concerns that both we see and the public see with the existing Public Health Act. And the best way to do that would be in an all-party way. And as such, sometime in the next week or two, I will be tabling a motion inside the House that will establish a special all-party committee in the legislature, that will meet similar to our existing standing committees, but will only have this specific mandate to review the Public Health Act. And Bill 10 obviously would be part of that process because of the changes that were made to the Public Health Act with Bill 10. That committee will have the ability to be able to hear from Albertans. It will go through a process to review concerns within that act that's existed, again, since about 1915. And then we'll recommend back to the legislature legislative changes, and then we'll move forward with the amendments to the Public Health Act at that time. I anticipate, as I said, to put the motion in the next few days. We're just working to put together the proper language around that to make it go through the House appropriately. And then I would anticipate that committee would meet throughout the summer, and then you would see the ultimate legislative changes sometime in early fall.
Thanks, Lisa. Next question, please.
Our next question comes from Dean Bennett of Canadian Press. Your line is open.
Thanks. Good morning, Minister. Just to follow up on Graham and James's question, I'm confused on Bill 15 here. The way you framed it, it sounds like it's just a symbolic affirmation of existing rights. So if you're actually making a change to how decisions are made on the ground, can you give us at least a sense of what's changing here on the ground with this bill?
Well, again, I don't want to completely step on the minister's announcement. Plus, as you do know, Dean, I have to be careful to get into too many specifics on the bill that's on the legislature. But I will say this. The bill will demonstrate our support, as I said, for educational programming, including public, separate, francophone, charter, and independent schools, as well as alternative programs and homeschooling. And the Act, when it's done, will ensure high-quality education in all educational programs and also enable better student transition between jurisdictions and schools or programs. I would refer you to the platform. It's very detailed on the conversation that we're having in regards to school choice. This is an important platform commitment that the Alberta government made to the people of Alberta. I think it will be a significant piece of legislation, and I'm looking forward to the debate inside the legislature and it ultimately passing.
Excellent. We'll go to the next question.
Our next question comes from Catherine Gagowski of Alberta Today. Your line is open.
Thanks for taking my question, Minister. So in October, you said you ain't seen nothing yet, referring to the legislative mandate you want to get through. To follow up on that, to be taking care of business, will you be working overtime? Like, do you expect evening sessions? Will you call the House back on Friday in order to get through these?
Well, now I kind of wish I came up with that line first. It's a great question. I anticipate that I've already put the motion to start night sittings into the sitting that we're in because of the way that the process worked. It's been obviously a very unique spring sitting, winter and spring sitting, but we're already in the middle of a sitting that included a budget and lots of debate on legislation. So I've already put in the motion of the House to be able to call night sittings. I don't know if I'll call a night sitting tomorrow, which would be the only day of the week I could call that we would be sitting, because Thursdays, as you know, we don't sit at nights. But I do anticipate for sure by Monday next week we will be in night sittings, and I do not believe that we will stop night sittings the rest of the way through the legislative session. How long our nights will be, as I always say, it's up to the official opposition House Leader as far as the time that we will be in the chamber and the work that they need to do to be able to debate our bills. But I will be passing our full spring agenda, whether it takes all of June or all of June and July, or if it takes all the way into September. I don't anticipate that the House will rise again until we've passed all our legislation.
Okay, I think we have one more question.
Our next question comes from Mirna Zhushkik of Radio Canada. Your line is open.
Yes, thank you for taking my question. The Minister, your government said it's a good time to build pipelines, to do work on that field. At the same time, you suspended a lot of monitoring requirements in the oil patch particularly. Do you see any danger or any risk, and how are you taking care of that?
Well, a couple things. First, our government believes all times are a good time to build pipelines, and it's not a secret. For anybody to be surprised that the province of Alberta's government is pro-pipeline, I would suggest they haven't been paying attention to what's been taking place in our province over the last several decades. But I don't mind reiterating that again. We are pro-pipeline. We believe pipelines are essential to the future of our province and our country, and to an industry that is the largest employer not only here but across the country, and is essentially the lifeblood of our country. So we will continue to be pro-pipeline. Specifically in regards to monitoring the question that you asked, let me be clear. The Department of Environment, Alberta Environment, has not suspended monitoring. We have suspended certain reporting requirements, not suspending the monitoring associated with that. Having said that, the Alberta Energy Regulator has suspended some monitoring of non-significant areas like water monitoring. Water monitoring remains in place despite things that others have been saying, and significant environmental monitoring remains in place. All rules for the environment must be followed. All reports about leaks or other things have to be reported and have been reported during the COVID-19 pandemic. And the Alberta Energy Regulator, as well as Alberta Environment and Alberta Energy officials, continue to do their job protecting the environment. What they are is talking about is long-term data sets and studies that are taking place over long periods of time, that after their assessments, having a delay of a couple months will not interfere with those studies. But the idea that this in any way prevents the protection of the environment is categorically false. As for more specifics about what the AER is doing, I refer you to the Alberta Energy Regulator, but I will close again with being clear that Alberta Environment has not shut down monitoring, but we have delayed reporting requirements.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks for your time, guys.